we introduced carbon fiber structure core, which is our SST, there isn't a paddle that even comes close in terms of technology and design and everything. This one like nailed it on all of those aspects. That can generate at 8 ounces the same velocity of a paddle that weighs 9.5 ounces. The important point here is where technology is going. I think I have maybe 19, 20 patents to date, and then like I said, I applied for 16. I think we'll probably get all 16. I'm pretty confident. Well, we need to do it to protect our technology, because then we have the situation of...
What do you mean by you don't believe in thermoform?
So now you have a paddle that'll play great for maybe a month or two, and then it breaks down. So you don't know what you're talking about, right? Because you don't inject foam around the perimeter. I mean, it's a whole process, right? It's a different process. So the consumer wins, but the industry loses in a way, because we're coming out with a line, it's called a G2, which is a fully molded paddle with a honeycomb core. We took a technology that we introduced probably 7 years ago. This is the closest to the claim of having the most power, the most control, the largest sweet spot, and maneuverability in a paddle. And this is definitely hands down the most advanced paddle.
Welcome to another episode of Building Pickleball. My guest today is Rafael Filippini. He's the founder, engineer, and inventor for Gearbox Sports, a composites company specializing in pickleball, racquetball, squash, and paddleball. Thank you to all my subscribers. Welcome to Building Pickleball.
Thank you. Glad to be here, and excited to talk about our new products and a little background of who we are and where we come from.
Yeah, the second time.
Yeah.
Oh man, for the people listening, I had some technical difficulties on my end, and we're doing this a second time around. So appreciate you coming down. I was up in San Antonio, and now you came down here. So appreciate you making the time, especially on Saturday.
Absolutely. No, really appreciate the opportunity.
I didn't know what you were going to come in, honestly, but you came in on like your bike, and I was like, damn, this is badass. Like, you live up to all that.
I think I mentioned the first episode, growing up in Southern California, one of the cool things of being down there is, we used to go like skiing in the mountains in the morning, like an hour and a half away, and you can come back, make it down San Diego and go surf, in the evening, get a little, or go dirt bike riding, skateboarding. It was a really, really cool place to grow up, because you had so many things. So, this bike that I came in today, those are just things that you never grow out of, as a kid. So motorcycles and all that, I really enjoy. So it's a nice day today. I figured, get out and ride and do the interview and talk about Gearbox and a little bit of background of ourselves. So I think this is sort of like figuring out who we are. And so yeah, that's part of my personality.
Yeah. No, that's what we're here for, right? Like, I love that side of the platform, is that like people, they usually comment, they're like, oh, it's like, I didn't know this about this founder. And like, that's what I'm trying to show, right? Like, we see the website, we see the products, but then we don't see like who's really behind it. And like, I feel like that's what we should be connecting to mostly, is like not just the product, because a lot of products can be similar. It's difficult, I think, to like the layman to differentiate what makes a product different. But then not just that, but like each individual behind the product is very different. Like, I think people just have different purposes. People have different intentions, different backgrounds. Like, you have that background that, this goes into the first question, is like something that separates you from most other founders and individuals in this space is that you've been into racquetball since 2007. You opened up the product line for pickleball in 2015. Like, help me visualize what that was like back then even. And like, a lot of people now are just coming into this sport probably in the past few years. It's like, you've seen that growth happening.
Since I was a young kid, 5 years old, started playing baseball. So I've always been athletic. I love sports. I think sports are an important part of an individual or, a person growing up. It's mind, body, and, health sort of a thing. So because of sports too, I was able to get a scholarship for university for racquetball. I was in the military. I went into the Marine Corps very young, and through racquetball, I was able to get on the Marine Corps racquetball team, and they also paid for college. So, sports just opens up so many opportunities. I think, even the Olympics, politically, I mean, race, everything is almost, it becomes so neutral. It becomes so, you don't see, you're just competing against other individuals. It doesn't matter background, where you come from. You're just trying to show that, hey, this is my best against your best. And it's a common ground where everybody comes in and becomes this great place. So sports have a very special place for me in those terms. All of my relationships are, my best friends are because we used to travel in sports, doing everything. So that connection to me, I brought that through, and because of sport, I was able to continue with school. I was able to, work, and everything I do now is I tied my sports background, my education, what I do for a living today. I mean, it's all based on, when I was a 5-year-old kid playing baseball, hitting a stick with, and I think that's just such a great opportunity and very privileged, and I appreciate that I've been able to live that way because, most people, my parents even now is like, what the hell are you doing? Like, are you going to get a job at some point? It's like, well, I thought I'm working, this feels like work. And, or it doesn't feel like work, but, my parents, he was like, God, dude, you got to grow up at some point, right? But I disagree with that. I pay my bills and I have fun and, I'm enjoying.
I pay my bills, damn it.
That's right. It's like, how much more can you grow up? As long as you're responsible with bills, you're okay.
What were you doing before you formed Gearbox? Like, have you always been an entrepreneur? Did you work for other people at some point?
Actually, I've been an entrepreneur since a young kid. I mean, at 10 years old, I used to go around the neighborhood and, cut people's yards or trim their trees. I bought a lawnmower. I remember I'd push it around. And at the age of 13, I got into buying, there was a store in California, it's called Mervyn's, and they used to sell like these watches that, there were watches that they would scratch the back of it. There were returns perhaps from customers, and you get them for like 40 to 50% off the regular price. So I used to go buy 3 or 4, and then I'd go and find customers for it, So like I would go and sell them to family members or whatever and make a little bit of money on it. So then later, actually, I've always done something like a little side or hustle, that growing up. And I did. I mean, I worked at a grocery store bagging initially, and then I did some other, teenage sort of jobs, and went in the Marine Corps, did that for 5 years. And then during that time, my parents had like small restaurants, and I was about 20. I was in the Marines going to school, and I thought, well, I'm going to give this. I thought I wanted to do, that type of a business restaurant, and I did, and I opened a couple small restaurants, like, very small, Mexican food and broiled chicken kind of a thing. And I found out early that just wasn't for me. I love the business side of it, but not. The hours were just.
Were you like innovating the chicken?
Yeah, right. Innovating. No, but I was doing systems because my father, he was very distrusting of people. He's, you need to have, managers, and he couldn't just give up control. So it was, and I could see that, like, I think he had 8 restaurants or so, small restaurants, and he couldn't grow beyond that because he just wanted the control, he was very distrusting with people. So, and I saw that, and then he had like a small distribution center where they created, he had this secret recipe, right, for the chicken. And he ended up like, he started selling some restaurants to try to franchise. And so it ended up where people would get the chickens that he marinated, and then they would buy their own, and then they'd kind of blend them and rub them together, and so you could see some of those things that were not in control. And I was fairly young back then. So I did try to write down procedures and things to, and that's why I thought, wow, I want to go to school. I want to figure out how to create procedures where it was, you can do things time after time. And I remember my dad complaining about one cook or another that they would tweak the recipe based on what they liked. And, so anyway, I wasn't inventing anything in particular, but I did want to create structure and things like that. So when I came in and I opened my place, or a couple of them, I tried that, but it just, I was way too young. I was 20 years old, and I wasn't ready to work those types of hours, and I was still in the Marine Corps and all that. So I was trying to manage from the outside, and I quickly realized that business, it was very enslaving almost.
Yeah.
You go in early, and it's nonstop. So, and then the reward maybe wasn't there, right? Now I'm so far beyond the food industry. I'm just like, no, I really enjoy the composites and the structures and all the things that I do today, but I think those were very good roots, I guess you would say, to get started. Business in itself, I think it's all the same or very similar. But so, for a young kid like myself to be able to do those things, it was very, very good for me to learn. And then I did work for another company as an engineer. I was building product, and because of the racquetball side, I was playing on the pro tour, and I was the engineer for this brand, and for about 13, 14 years. And that really opened up my eyes from, coming from a family business sort of mentality to more corporate and seeing more things. And that, I was like, yeah, this is the direction that I want to go. And I worked for the company. We had an awesome relationship with the owner. I got to do and create and build a lot of things. I left only because that particular owner was hesitant. He wanted perfection, right? He was kind of an individual that he wanted everything lined up perfectly before we launched a product, or it's like, oh no, the market has to be right. This has to be right. And I would develop a product. It took 3 or 4 years before it went into market. He was always waiting for the right timing. And for me, I was building a lot of things. I was like, we build the product, and we're like, okay, let's go, take it to market. No, it's not quite ready yet. We have to do this, or we have to do more. We got to investigate that market a little more. And years would go by, and we're like, oh man, I think we're losing the opportunity. Well, even I found out later, because he could have entered pickleball easily a long time ago. He's like, no, while looking at this pickleball thing, I don't think it's going to be a viable business. All the research that I did and all that. And sometimes I think if you get caught up too much into the details of, your business plan and all this, you can lose the opportunity. I'm a little more of a risk taker, so I jump in, and once I'm in, I'm just like, you figure it out.
Yeah. Tell you came here on like a dirt bike, basically.
Yeah.
That's super interesting though, because like your experience of working for your dad, like that was definitely a formative year. Like the way you're talking about it, you question the way things are, and you can see that in the way that Gearbox is now. Like you're not following the same blueprint as everyone else. We'll get into that, but like when you show me the materials, like the composites, and then you also showed me like just how the paddles are just made differently. Everyone kind of claims that, right? But it might be something on the exterior, it might be some technology, like I guess in the past year or two, it's been like thermoform. But when I actually look inside, look at the core, and I look at the patents of Gearbox, it's great to see that, okay, when I introduced you as engineer, innovator, like inventor, like those are all true titles, right? But it's also very interesting that like two things that really stood out to me was like a lesson you learned from your dad is probably like control. And then also lesson that you learned from working for that other individual was like this idea of perfection. And you're just like, no, just a risk taker, just like go and put it out there and just let things unfold rather than trying to predict the right time. Are those two things something that kind of guides how Gearbox is now and the way you treat the company?
Yes, absolutely. And I have my sister actually works with me, and she's operations manager and does this, and she's also very, very structured. And I say also not because of me, but more like my old boss, right? I'm more of a risk taker. I see things and I was like, no, we have to do things now, kind of a thing. So there is a balance. I think if I was just on my own, and you have to have somebody to maybe balance you out a little bit, right? But and a lot of times, you just I see things, and you have this gut feeling like, oh, it's the right time, and you go. And quite honestly, too, I feel that if you don't do it and you don't just put yourself out there, you won't learn. We learn from making mistakes. I think those, you want to be cautious. You want to do a little bit of research or a lot of it, and understand what you're getting into. But fear, I think, will prevent most people or a lot of people from moving forward. The unknown, right? We what if this happens? What if that happens? Well, you're never going to really know until you actually dive in and you're in it. And once you are in it, you figure ways to get through it, right? And you persevere, you kind of push. And then if you fail at that, whatever thing you're doing, you learn from it and you try it again, and I think that's what makes a difference of why some people do certain things and others don't. A lot of times, with Gearbox and everything that we do is like, we're in a difficult situation, whatever it may be. Like, God, it'd be easier to just work for somebody and come home at 5 and just chill, right? And forget about it. But that's not me. I like the thrill. I like the challenge. I like the
unpredictability.
Unpredictability, solving problems, doing and exposing myself to. I just feel it makes me better. I grow from it, and I like just learning and putting myself out there. And I like being in uncomfortable places. People that are much smarter than me, just, okay, throw yourself in that group, learn. You're going to learn. Yeah, you're intimidated, but you're saying, whatever. I'll pick up a tip or two and then move on, and you put that in your, in your bag of knowledge, sort of a thing. So, yeah, it's fun, So, and it's worked for me, I think. I've got a very nice business. We enjoy. Like I said earlier, I'm doing the things I love to do, and yeah, it's challenging at times, but it's very rewarding overall.
Yeah, man, I agree 100% on like just being the kid in the sandbox rather than being the kid that's like watching the other kids play, right? Like there's definitely truth to that. Like you're gonna fail more times than they are, but you're also gonna like be a lot closer to that one like small win that you're eventually going to achieve. I have plenty of people in my friend circle, in my family, who are much smarter than me, much more talented, but I just pull the trigger all the time. And I even quote that from my coach. I just ask him stuff like that. I ask him about advice, right? I'm just like,
right.
Who do you usually take advice from? He's like, man, unless these people aren't doing what I'm doing, then I usually don't take advice from most people. I just keep pulling the trigger. I was like, yeah, that's true. Like I just try to look at everything as like an experiment, just like constant output. And if you do that, then there's always like a lesson that you're receiving from it, like kind of like what you're saying. And going into like Gearbox, it's like did you guys first put out the product line in 2015?
Yeah, it was around 2015, and started developing around 2000, early or late 2014. I was exposed to pickleball around 2008 the first time. There was some wood paddles. They had a little bit of honeycomb, and I looked at the structures and I thought, wow, especially coming from composites and the way we build. There's composites, you press them from the outside in or the inside out, like if you're blowing up a balloon kind of a thing, right? So, and you put it in a cavity mold. So my expertise are more blowing things up from the inside out and pushing the material to the walls of a cavity mold. I do obviously press as well, but in both of those, they work in a similar manner, but just different techniques. So I looked at pickleball, particularly the wood, and then even the honeycomb structures, and back then they're breaking all the time, and so our focus was like, boy, I could create a much stronger structure initially. And then pickleball back then, 2000, they had a lot of finesse and different shots, but the game was very basic, right? The strategy was you get into the kitchen and then you dink and then you wait for an opportunity. It wasn't as aggressive. You were trying to win the rally and the dinking, and then maybe with an aggressive or a little more aggressive shot, you finish the game. And then as it progressed, I remember players, and now this is probably 2018 or so. There was a gentleman, Marcin, I think his name, I forget his last name, but very good tennis player. He came in and they were a little more aggressive, and I don't think Ben Johns, or maybe he might have just been coming into the scene. So all these guys, I mean, you watch the game go from a very, very easy dinking sort of control game into what the game is today. And the equipment, if you really look at it, hasn't really changed that much from like 2000. Well, some of the earlier honeycombs, I mean, they were using the same honeycomb paddles up until probably 3 years ago, when they started playing around with more materials, the thermal form sort of structure. But even beyond that, it's still the same. You have a plastic honeycomb core, or maybe a aramid, or aramid is the same as Kevlar, so it's just a different trade name. But or they might use an aluminum core. But now aluminum core, the Kevlar or aramid cores are phasing out because they were loud, they were tingy, so polypropylene is sort of what stayed, right? Or probably the most popular. We introduced a carbon fiber structure core, which is our SST, around 2015. And we've been tweaking that, since day one. And by tweaking, I mean, we've changed.
All right, it's October, so that means it's about that time to start Christmas shopping. And Viore let me know some of the best-selling products so I can make that easier for you. If you're looking for something for your partner and they're female, these are some good recommendations. And if your partner is male, these are also some good recommendations. And since it's that time of season, things are getting a little bit colder, and you may be looking for something maybe just for yourself, and you're looking for something warmer, this is my personal recommendation. This is the Ponto crew neck. The entire Ponto line is super soft. I have that crew neck. I don't have any of the other items, but I really, really like that crew neck. It's really lightweight. When I recently went to Seattle, that was actually my favorite piece of clothing that I brought with me, because it's just super lightweight, and it was just enough to keep me warm in the airport or on the airplanes, where they're typically a little bit colder, but not too much where it felt too heavy and almost like it would be too big to stuff into my bag. Go to viore.com/buildingpickleball. Not only will you receive 20% off your first purchase, but you'll also receive free shipping on any orders of $75 or more, as well as free returns. Enjoy the rest of the show.
The materials, the fiber angles, trying to make it a little softer, a little more stiffer, depending, to get more flex and absorb more energy or return more energy. And our challenge has been syncing our core. And what I mean by syncing is, like, we sync the playability, its response with the paddle, with the players, right? You have such a wide range of players that there's players looking for power, finesse, and then there's just like some that I don't want any power and generator, I just want to be able to dink. So we were trying to make 1 or 2 paddles that would suffice that range, right? Or kind of cover that entire range. And we started finding out, well, we really can't cater to everybody. So let's focus on a group. And luckily for us, when we first came out in 2015, our paddles were pretty hot. And the pro players, it was too fast for that style of game back then. But we found a customer base that was a 70-plus-year-old customer, females and males who couldn't really, with a honeycomb paddle, when they went to return the ball, they couldn't get it passed over the net. Like, so they were having a hard time getting the return. Like, they would serve to them and they would hit the ball and it wouldn't go very far past the net, so they couldn't get it to the back court. But because our paddles had so much more pop, they're like, "Wow, now I can." Instantly, they were like, "I can play pickleball now. I don't have to struggle and swing really hard." So we were able to create this, and it was by accident. It wasn't by design. So that was one of those things. Hey, just get in the game and see where it goes, right? And so we had this group of people, particularly Florida, like South Florida, Naples area, Utah, I recall. So a lot of these markets where a lot of the snowbirds would go to, retired older players, they loved our paddle because it gave them that much more pop. And so it made them more competitive.
Kind of leveled that playing field in that aspect.
Yeah, leveled that playing field for them. So so all of a sudden we're noticing, like, boy, we're selling a lot of Gearbox paddles to the older community. So we're like, okay, that works. So we found this market that really worked. And yeah, we weren't in that mainstream market where, the tournament players and all that, because it wasn't sort of the right paddle for them. There's a few who got into it. And because more tennis players were coming in. So then as we grew, okay, now we were looking to slow the paddle down and more feel. So it took us about 2 years to get the next sort of generation. We slowed it down, put a little bit more feel. And that was our GX5. And where we missed that is it had this funny sound. Some people loved it and others hated it, right? So we're like very divided. It's like this paddle, you had people who are like, oh man, this is wonderful. And you could see their opponents were like, God, I hate that paddle, the sound or whatever, but others were like, we loved it. So that was another sort of lesson we learned. Well, people relate the sound to the performance of the paddle, right? So it's like a higher pitch generally tends to be more power. A lower pitch, people, and what I'm saying is that we've tested the ball. So I've tested the ball coming off the face, the velocity coming off the face of the paddle. I can have 2 that are exactly the same, but I change the pitch to a higher pitch or versus a lower pitch, and I'll give the paddle to the same person immediately. Oh no, this one's more powerful. Oh no, this one's for control. But the ball's really coming off the same. And I can tell them, it's like, oh no, the ball's coming off the same speed. Oh no, it's not. I could see it and I can feel it, but it doesn't. It's exactly the same. So rather than sit there and trying to convince somebody, it's like, no, you're wrong. It's not coming off. And look, here's the measurements. You say, okay, you're right. Because that's your perception. Yeah. I can't change it, right? Yeah. So we have to adapt to that perception or what that is. And here I'm sitting in a lab, I have measurements and I'm like, no, this ball's faster, this one's slower, these are the same, now this pitch or that pitch. How do you create a video or, a document? Nobody's gonna read all this stuff. They're like, no, I don't care what you're saying, dude. You're kind of nuts. I feel the ball. I can see it. This one has more power and this one's more control.
They don't care how the sausage is made. Like, they just want,
just like, well, it tastes like this, right? And you can't tell me that that's what it tastes like to me. And so that was a a lesson that, and I kind of knew that because from racquetball and other sports, when we develop and I'm working with athletes to get that feedback, racquetball I would say was much easier because there were sound wasn't really coming into play as much as it does in pickleball. The sound and, how it does when you get into very high tensions, like string tensions and string types, but not as much as pickleball. So that took a little while for us to adjust. And so now we can do things to, okay, if the perception is a certain frequency that, the ball has more control, then let's put that into our matrix of developing a paddle. We didn't have that in. So now there's, the perception of vibration, the feel when you hit the ball coming into your hand. How does that translate into the audible, the coming into your ear, what you feel, what you see, and how that ball reacts, right? So we kind of got a good handle of that. And then spin came in, right? So we're like, now spin, texture. We had a fairly smooth surface. We used to coat the paddle with it had a softer durometer on the coating itself. So the urethane that we used was a little softer. So it actually grabbed the ball.
I thought the GX5 and the GX6, like that was my first paddle after my Amazon paddle. I thought it was pretty gritty. I had like the green one.
Oh yeah. Well, we started doing a chemical process to kind of roughen the, the texture a little bit, but because prior to that, so our first paddles, the surface, we didn't have the grit, and in the way a customer, and this is probably, 2019, the first thing they do, they come up to our booth, they go, is just this. And if you didn't have a certain like texture or feel, they just bypass the paddle. So we're like, oh, whoa. So even though we had a softer finish and our spin rates, if you go back, our spin rates have always been very, very good and high. I mean, it more than, a lot of the paddles. And even when they were slick and smooth, but it didn't matter. If the consumer did this and there was no grit on it, they're like, I don't care if we talk about our, bite technology. Oh, the ribs come through and they push and they do that. They're like, I don't care. It's smooth and it doesn't have spin. So we're like, okay, now we got to fix that, So and I'm talking about a period of 7 years that we're learning, and we're still learning. Because now you've got players coming in from all kinds of different sports backgrounds, some without, and they're being very creative and all that. So kind of keeping up and learning from all that has been a challenge. But I think we have enough knowledge now. And I think for the very first time, well, it's not that I think, I know now, we are able to put all the different things that the players are looking for. It's like, so they're looking for a textured surface and one that doesn't wear out after a couple of months. The sprayed on ones tend to wear out fairly quick. They want the texture to last a long time and perform. And then they want durable paddles. They want the feel. They want the sound and all of these things to be incorporated into their paddle. But they also want tons of power, tons of control, huge sweet spots, and the ability to shape the ball beyond physics, right? So we're like, okay. So we're like, okay, that's our goal, right? So started working on it. We've created this is a textured cure ply now. So this is actually cured. So we can now make the surfaces, a certain way to texture it, not texture it. And then we created a method to bond this to a soft core, which is our rib structure, before going into the mold. And then we use pre-cured and soft plies to bond to create. Give you a little sneak peek into our paddle, but we're able to now put that textured surface right onto a molded paddle. So now that textured surface goes into it. We're able to mold it and create this just awesome And to be quite honest now, so we said, okay, people want a fast paddle. So we created a power and a control. So they have a choice. But in addition to that, they're saying, well, I want to be able to really shape the ball. So what we did with the core on both of these is we made the core so it actually absorbs, and the ball sort of sinks into the face, but also the paddle flexes back and it shapes around the ball, and then it slings it, or almost like a slingshot or a trampoline. Trampoline, I think that's probably the most common word being used today, but it's occurring with the entire structure. So it's flexing from the throat area, it's bending back, it's sort of cupping around, and then it throws the ball back. And we're doing that, and we also lowered the frequency. So now there's the control aspect is in there, so you have very easy dinking. We've increased the size of the sweet spot on the paddle. So, I mean, literally you can bounce a ball almost all the way to the edge of the frame, and you have that forgiveness, or that dwell time that goes into the ball. So expanding the sweet spot makes a very forgiving paddle. It's at 8 ounces, and people generally, when you have a light paddle and you hit the ball off center, it tends to twist very easy. But because this one absorbs the ball, it doesn't twist in your hand. So we can keep a very neutral 8-ounce paddle with a very light rotational weight, and gives you very quick hands and tons of stability.
That's caused by what you were talking about with that carbon fiber, like it more pliable, like this, like front and back, but it's not like twisty, right?
Yes, correct. And then the actual face is more forgiving, so the ball travels deeper. One of the things people notice, when you hit a ball, there's a ball mark that's left on the. You're going to notice with these paddles, the ball mark diameter is actually going to be larger. And it's not that you're compressing the ball more, or you're not flattening the ball. What's actually happening, the ball's traveling deeper into this paddle. So you have more surface to surface contact with the ball. So the paddle is sort of wrapping around the ball, and then it releases. So by having more of that surface to surface contact, you're able to keep the ball a little longer on your paddle. Because you have more of the ball going in, it grabs it, and then you can actually spin it more. So that's the shaping of the ball. And the energy that it returns, we did it in 2 ways. So one, we have the power, and then we have the control. With the control, the energy coming in from the ball and then the impact, we keep more of that in the paddle. It doesn't go back into the ball. Where on the control, or on the power, we push more of that energy back into the ball. So then you'll see this as the ball exits our power paddle, it's coming off hot versus the other one. The other one, you're going to have to generate more of the power yourself. Yeah. Where this one, you could keep actually a shorter stroke and generate plenty of power with it.
What's behind the technology?
It's the way we built the core. So
yeah, you talked a little bit about that rib structure before. If you could kind of explain it like I don't
know if the camera would pick some of this up, but there's some writing on these. So this one says 30 degrees. So this is a 30 degree ply. FAW is the fiber aerial weight, or the density for a certain area, for a square meter. This is 19 degree. This 19 degree is fairly stiff. You see that? Where a 30 degree, same material, just different angles, very soft. And then we have 0 degree. Well, I kind of broke this one up, but this is very stiff. I mean, so this guy will, but it's all the same, and it's T700 at 0 degrees, 19 degrees, and 30 degrees. And I think I even have I had a 45. So by changing the fiber angle, you can change how stiff the bending, or you can make it more flexible, or you can make it stiffer so there's more resistance. But also if this one's 30 degrees, it's softer, but when I go to twist it, it's going to be stiffer on the when I twist it, because you have a positive and negative, so it's going to take more force to twist. Where the zero, I can twist and essentially just, there's no fiber in between. This is just being held by resin. So most of this structure, its strength is at 0 degrees this way. So this is very, very stiff. That is one way by changing our rib structure inside. So we have ribs that run the length. That is how we begin to either absorb energy and keep it in the paddle or return it. One of the cool things that we did with this, and you'll see some drawings or graphics, we actually, so our rib structure runs from the top down to the bottom of the paddle. Well, on this particular one, we broke it up into 7 sections. So rather than being one single core, we have 7 microcores within the core of the paddle. So what that does is, by creating these sections, now there's no structure in between the sections, so that makes, that allows, for more movement, and it allows for more reaction, but the compression is still there. So we allowed the whole structure to move back and flex and sort of shape, and that's where, that is how these cores are much different. And that's what's really cool about carbon fiber. You cannot do that with polypropylene. Plastic is just the piece of plastic. I mean, it's like a straw, right? There's very little structure to it. It's heavy. This thing is just, it's super light, and but it's extremely strong. Like, you can hang a semi truck off of this piece, and the tensile strength of it is just tremendous. Carbon fiber and utilized in the right way, you can make just some amazing structures, and that's really my specialty, right? So that's where we can get into these really cool structures and create these systems that are very efficient in absorbing energy or returning energy and feel. And then we created some dampening materials in there that that help us with that perception of feel, right? So that's connected to sound, it's connected to the vibration in your hand, and how the ball sort of jumps off the face. So for the very first time, and I think in pickleball in general, and there isn't a paddle that even comes close in terms of technology and design and everything. And this one nailed it on all of those aspects. And I think this is the beginning of a new generation of pickleball paddles that will be, for sure, I think Gearbox will lead that, because we have patents on all this, so not anybody can just come in and copy. So we've I have a patent now that's been our solid span technology patent. I think it was issued probably 3-4 years ago. It took about 2 years to get it through the examiner and all that. So, and now I've just applied for like 16 new patents. This particular paddle has 3 of the new ones, and then some new proprietary things that we did. So you're going to see, I think, the evolution of feel and performance and shape and all that. That is just going to get better from here forward. Yeah.
Something before we get into patents, because I think that's definitely a very interesting aspect, especially given if you look at a lot of the top paddles, you start to see that they're somewhat redundant. The only thing that's changing is probably branding and marketing. Before we get into that, a popular question that you probably get with any paddle, especially these days, is like edgeless. Is that edgeless?
Yes. And the majority of our paddles are edgeless. And what edgeless really means, that it goes into a mold, which is a cavity mold. So we then we blow it up internally like a balloon, like you would push all the material to the edges of the mold.
What is that material? So it might make more sense to other people. Like, I saw that, like, you have the rib structures and you have that, it's not hollow, but there's like that material that we like.
Yeah, there's different, some of it we can use for dampening. We can use a rubber type material. For expansion, there's actually this right here. This is, I won't tell you exactly what it is, but it's a chemical process that expands when it reaches a certain temperature. So at about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, it will begin to expand. So this piece, I'll show it a little closer here, is the handle of our, but this isn't the outside. I mean, this is a pre-shape of our handle. So then what we do with this is we begin to wrap the carbon fiber around this. And then this piece, when we shape this at a lower temperature, and then once we're ready to mold it, we fire it up at a much higher temperature, and then this will expand again. So this could expand maybe 2 or 3 times, and it'll expand probably, depending on the material, up to 30 times its original shape. So, and by doing that, we can create tremendous pressure internally, and that helps push the material. That is one way. So this is what we call doing it through a chemical process. We could also use a gas. So once we, if we had like a bladder and we wanted a sealed system, so then I would put a gas in here, and then when we put that in the mold, the gas would just expand, right, and push everything to the sides. Or we could put like an air nozzle in the mold, and then with a bladder as well, then with a compressor or just external air pressure, we can pressurize the inside of the paddle. So there's several ways to create this internal pressure. This is one of them. This material here, it's not structural. So, there's no structure to this. This is, yeah. So this, you can see it's not structural, but this helps us shape. It gives us what we call a pre-shape, so we can form the carbon fiber around it. Our goal is to form this paddle almost to the perfect dimension to fit inside the cavity mold, because you don't want it to be small and then expand and stretch, or too big and then you compress it because you get wrinkles and all that. Wrinkles in carbon fiber are a no-no. And then if you don't have enough, so the mold or the part going into the mold has to match almost perfectly. Otherwise you get air bubbles, you get areas that don't blow up properly, and anytime you do that, you compromise your structure a little. So there's a trick to doing what we call the pre-shape to match it almost perfect to go into the mold. You want to just be able to put this piece into the mold and just fire it up and just pressurize the heck out of it. So your part, once it's cured, it's perfect. And so we do that again with air. We can do it with this expanding foams. We can add other materials in there. So I can actually embed dampening materials within this piece. I can do all kinds of stuff, and that's what's really cool. So with the combination of, and it's also, feel the weight of that.
Yeah.
It's
ridiculous.
There's no weight.
It's almost, feels like a piece of popcorn.
Yeah, it's like popcorn, but it creates tremendous pressure. So, you take that compared to polypropylene, which is a plastic that's extremely heavy. I mean, it's structurally, they're just, we're in two different worlds, and again, polypropylene and honeycomb paddles have their place. But now that we've actually matched the sound, the feel, the things with carbon fiber and some of these other techniques, we're going to push pickleball to other, and pickleball paddle technology to other realms. And then you get an athlete that can really maximize the performance of this. So now this paddle right now is at 8 ounces, but I can literally make this paddle extremely strong, probably 6 ounces. Yeah. Is the 6 ounce paddle something viable today? Probably not, because it's not. Somebody needs to learn how to use a 6 ounce paddle, and then how do we do things. I don't know where the game, but we have that capability. We can obviously make a 6, maybe even a lighter paddle. We can make a heavier paddle. with the same strength and have just these tremendous. So I don't know where the industry will go in terms of the athlete, but we have quite a huge range to build a lot of things, So now we have this paddle, the Pro paddle, the Pro Power, that can generate at 8 ounces the same velocity of a paddle that weighs 9.5 ounces. So now you've got the maneuverability of this very light paddle, super quick, with power at your hands, when you need it, and just tons of control. You don't need a lot of mass behind it. The paddle's not going to twist on you. It's not going to get pushed back because somebody hit the ball hard. It'll actually return the energy. So now, how does that change somebody's game? So one of my goals with this was, if you needed more power, you don't need to go for a large swing. So you can just come here, and now you're ready. You just pop that ball back to your opponent pretty hard, and you didn't really move. So you're in the ready position to receive their shot, if they returned it, right? But so how do we shorten the stroke? How do we keep you in a more ready position most of the time? And that's really what all of these things are going into the design of this paddle. And that's what's fun, and that's what's really cool.
It is cool, man, because dude, you've been a racket player for God knows how long. It's probably over like 20 years at this point. But you came up with Gearbox in like 2015 with your team and everyone involved. But then like we've talked about in the past before, where like the timing wasn't always kind of right. Like, you're right that the game and the products do kind of align with what the customer and like the players need or want or seeking. And that's always going to be difficult to catch up to. But I think like the timing of this paddle, and based on the reviews I've read or heard about too, like, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to mention this guy again, Chris Olsen.
Chris Olsen,
yeah, Pickleball Studio. Like, he didn't divulge any information that he wasn't supposed to, but he was just like, he kept it pretty short. He's like, this is a game changer. He didn't really use any other words except that. And like, to hear that, because over the past like year and a half, I think the Hyperion was like a great paddle that like changed things, and then everyone kind of followed suit. But then what is the next evolution, right? Like, what's the next thing that people are looking for? What's great about this paddle is like, I think people know what they're looking for, but also like, as Steve Jobs had said, and like Henry Ford, right? Like, if we gave people what they wanted, we still have like people riding like horse-drawn carriages. You kind of like have to force
it a little bit.
Yeah. Be able to predict that in a way, but you're taking a risk on it too by providing this. But like, man, like, I'm excited to see what people think, because I think I talked about with Will too, is that like, I think in the next year, or I don't know however long more, but like, I think power is going to be a huge emphasis now. And like, even the way you talked about, because you come from a player background and you understand the different like dynamics of playing and like body movement and all that, you're talking about having a shorter swing. Like, that makes a lot of difference, right? Like, milliseconds, like fractions of a second of time to like change your body position, changing your like paddle face position. If you can minimize that using like a paddle, using like an instrument, that's going to make a huge difference. So like, now you have people moving a little bit less, so there's less like variability in the way their body is moving. That's going to be like super, super interesting.
Yeah, well, right now, here's how pickleball is broken down, right? You want control, 16, 18 millimeter paddle, right? A thick paddle. You want power, a thin paddle. Also, you want more power, heavier paddle. You want a more stable paddle, way out at the 3 and 9 o'clock, to get the stability from a wide paddle. Increase the size of the sweet spot, weigh it out at the add lead tape to 3 and 9 o'clock or somewhere around there. You want spin, well then you add more texture. All those are great, but they're very basic ways to manipulate your paddle. Here we're giving you an 8-ounce paddle. You don't have to put lead tape on the sides. It's very stable. At 8 ounces, it's extremely maneuverable. It's going to give you the power I actually saw some numbers. So this paddle's coming in. I mean, they have some EVA foam paddles right now that, aren't legal or whatever. I'm just going to say a number, but this is pretty close to it. They're hitting the ball at 60 miles an hour, right? A traditional honeycomb paddle is hitting the ball around 52 miles an hour. Our paddles, the Pro Power came in like at 55, 56. And then the Pro Control hits just as hard as, a current, legal power paddle, as they call it. So we're giving you a little bit more power than the most powerful paddle that's out there that's legal, not, a thermoformed or a delaminator or, broken core thermoform, or the EVA paddles. So you've got that power right below that number, but the control that's in here is tremendous. So, and it's all in one standard 8-ounce paddle. That is like your base. Now, if you want to customize it, you say, well, I'm used to a heavier weight, then go ahead. But before you do that, I would challenge you to maybe speed up your hands a little because as soon as you start adding a lot of weight to the paddle, you're giving up maneuverability, right? There's always a cause, there's a cause and effect, right? So you add weight, you slow it down. You remove weight, you speed it up, but then you don't have enough power behind the paddle or stability. What I'm saying is we kept this at 8 ounces. You have the stability of a 9.5 ounce paddle. You have the power of a 9.5 ounce paddle. You have the control of a 9.5 ounce paddle, but the maneuverability of an 8 ounce paddle, the swing weight, they're going to, some of the guys that are reviewing the paddles, they're going to give you the actual numbers of the rotational weight, and they're going to give you the swing weight.
Have you gotten those numbers, the swing weight?
I do, but I'll wait for some of the guys to. That way it's not coming from me. You'll hear it, and then they'll tell you they're independent individuals who are, and the equipment that some individuals use is different from ours. So swing weight is not like weight that there's a law or there's, a standard that 1 gram is 1 gram. So swing weight, there's different swing weight machines. So one machine could be 122. Another, company's machine is like 115. We use a Rossignol machine that we really like. So our swing weight measures in the like 78 when some of these other machines were weighing 120. So there's no law of, okay, this is what swing weight is. It's more of a measurement.
I try to tell that to people because people wanted that in a review. They're like, oh, well, you're not talking about like the swing weight. I was like, dude, because that's not objective. And like, if you're looking for like an objective measurement, like, well, for starters, the paddle someone gets can be not completely different, but there is going to be variability between like what I receive and what someone else receives. And then like you just said, like
for sure,
the instrument to measure that. And I was like, so just like feel it for yourself is what I like try to tell people. I was like, there's like certain things like weight. I think the weight of the paddle does make sense. The like length and all that, I think that makes sense too, because just based on the player. But when I talk about like swing weight and like RPMs, I'm like, those numbers don't really matter. Like I've seen multiple reviewers have different RPMs for the same paddle, and for the reasons you just discussed.
Yeah, I mean, they're sort of crude methods being used, of measuring RPM and things. There's obviously some equipment out there, but we don't have standards right now. I mean, the only standards that USAPA, I mean, obviously we have weight. I mean, that you can't argue with that. Even spin rate, even if you had a robot, I would question the spin rate because, for example, our handle is very rigid, but then you have some honeycomb core paddles that there's companies that still use the wood, which is the balsa wood, which is very soft. So when you go to clamp that down, the balsa wood's going to be soft and sort of squishy.
Yeah.
Some have like a rubberized or a EVA foam handle that they create the larger handle with. So how do you account for the variance or the variable of the material, squeezing down? And And actually right now they're trying to develop some tests that measure, the speed off the face of the paddle. And all those variables are going to be a factor. It's like, well, wait a minute. Our handle is very rigid. How do you account for your clamp that holds the paddle in place? Oh, we're going to use a robot to swing the same way. I said, well, that's all great. But your clamping system, you're going to have to use the exact same clamping system, and the materials and the handle have to be kind of the same. So there's, at the end, I think we are going to, or we created a paddle that is very neutral, and I totally encourage people to experiment with it. I want to encourage people to see just what you can do. So our player base, we have some that are experimenting with, the power one, because they're shaping the ball, they're doing they're just adding new shots to their tool bag. And you have others that are more traditional. They're like, oh no, I've been working so hard and for such a long time on my stroke that I don't want to change anything. So I thought, perfect. We've got the control one that's going to give you that base. You don't need to, you do it as you want. And then, just continue the stroke that you've been working really hard with. And then use this to get you to that feel, give you more spin and give you a ton of feel. And just so I did get out. So this paddle here, like I said, is about 55 to 57 miles an hour, right around that range. This one is coming in right at 54. So about 3 mile an hour difference on using the same, sort of testing. But the feel, very different. Some people are, oh my God, I just not generating, as much speed. But it's a perception too. So, but in terms of measuring the ball coming off the paddle, it's going to be very close, overall. But the important point here is where technology is going. And that's the exciting part for me. I mean, this is only the first step. I mean, actually for us, the first step was getting rid of the polypropylene core. I mean, even before us, it went from wood and somebody, created the polypropylene core with the honeycomb structure. And that was awesome. I mean, and it's still a viable technology today. I think they're referring to those as first generation paddles now. And now you have thermoform that are second generation. We created this SST core 2015 or so, or late 14. And now, what is that, 7-8 years later, we're dialing it in now. So now I think people are going to appreciate what we were trying to do back then in what we're doing in today's paddle. And it took 8 years to really develop, understand, and sort of hone in on the player and the technology and sort of marry them or, bring it together. So yeah, we're excited about the future. I'm super excited about this new release. And so that's kind of what has brought us to this moment at this point.
It's cool, man. I mean, like I mentioned before, the Gearbox was my first aftermarket. That was when I was like, oh, I need a step up now. And it's cool to see, because that was in 2020, but the company's been around the pickleball side has been around since 2015. So I consider Gearbox to be somewhat of a legacy brand. So to see you guys, you always had the technology, but now to see it actually coming out, being exposed, being getting eyes on it and getting the traction, and then to see the technology is actually being advanced is super, super cool. And if there's first, like you said, there's first and second generation paddles, possibly could this be third generation? So that's cool that you even have that in the history of pickleball, the advancement of pickleball. And you kind of touched on it a little bit, but the SST core, we mentioned a little bit about patents. What is your perspective on patents? How do you, I think we hear about it a lot if you go on Reddit and you hear just in the community forums of people copying different things. Someone had a photo of a rhombus paddle that had the 6-0 plastic wrap around the grip, like a brand new paddle, and they like someone received it shipped like that. And you're like, okay, like at what point do we draw the line? Because as a customer, that can get kind of annoying, right? You're like, oh, I thought I was buying something different. But I think people are starting to understand like most of the paddles that a lot of people that are being passed around now, the variance is minimal, and just curious to see and understand like how do you keep people from infringing on patent? How do you go about creating a patent? Like when do you know when to patent something?
Yeah, well, first of all, the patent, you just don't create it, or you just don't say, well, I'm going to patent that. It's in order to receive a patent, it has to be an original idea. And it has to be unique, and it has to have not been done in the past, or there's some variance of something that has been done in the past. And you have to present that to the examiner of the United States or examiner of whatever country you're trying to patent to say, hey, this has never been done. This is a unique idea. And there is, well, let me just say this. There's a couple of types of patents. One, you have a utility patent, and then you have a design patent. Design means that, well, I'm going to patent the way the shape of this cup is, and, you know, and it's a very basic patent. So, you know, for example, we have this cup, and I'm going to patent that this curve comes here, and, you know, you do some design to it, but you're only getting that patent to that specific design. If I come through and I say, well, I'm going to make this square or rectangular, I patent that, but I still have a cup and I still have a handle. In a utility patent, using this same example, is you can say, well, I have a cup, but every time I put really hot coffee, this cup is burning my hand, right? So what I did is I patented this ear that comes out, and now I can hold my hot coffee without me burning my hand. And that is more of a utility patent. That means there's an actual function, and there's a benefit to that. It's not just a design because it looks a certain way. This actually has a function. So now I can drink coffee at, I don't know, 180 degrees if you want, and without burning my hand. I can hold the cup all day long, and the coffee's going to stay hot, and my hand's not going to burn. So that would be what we consider a utility patent, and that's where I see a lot. And if you look, patent pending, patent pending, patent pending. And yeah, they may have patent pending means that they've submitted a patent to the United States Patent Office, USPTO, but that doesn't mean that they're going to get a patent. You have to prove to the examiner, it's like, hey, this is an original idea. It has this function. I'm claiming that this paddle is going to have this performance. And you have to prove it. You can't just say it. It's okay, well, show me your data. Show me what it's doing. And most of the time, and there's a section of a patent that has the claim section. And in there you have to say, okay, I made a paddle that does this. It's made of these materials. It's doing that and that. And you make that, you make 100 claims. The examiner is going to come back and probably knock off 70% of them. So a utility patent is really what you're after. A design patent is, it's cute, right? It's got a different shape, a color, very basic. So a utility patent, in what we do, that's our focus, is we protect not only its function and like our SST, but if you go read through the patent, it's the process too of how we're manufacturing. So, it's the process of this material is used, that material, we apply heat at this moment, and the ribs expand or this expands. So it's very specific steps on how we create this structure. And the more we do that, the more protection that you have. So in a patent, a utility patent, you want to write it as broad as possible to prevent others from coming in and going around it, in a way. So you'll see a lot of patent pending stuff, but actually patented, very different. And that's I don't know, I think I have maybe 19, 20 patents to date. And then like I said, I applied for 16. I think we'll probably get all 16. I'm pretty confident. We already have some already now. And when you apply for a patent, you're not only applying in the United States, because we're manufacturing in other countries. So you have to patent in the countries where you manufacture and in the countries where you're going to sell your product. Otherwise, somebody can go around it. And that process can get very expensive. It's not a cheap, not only what it costs to build it or to get the patents, you have to maintain it, and then you have to patent in all the multiple countries that you want to sell the product in.
If you have a patent, can you sell like rights to it or something? Like, can you like commercialize it?
Yeah, you can commercialize. So if I could choose to say, okay, well, I've patented this technology, or I created this product. You can license it out, right? Yeah, you can license the patent, or you receive royalties. You say, you license it to another brand, and let's say, Nike approached Gearbox, or a large brand like that approached Gearbox and said, look, we're interested in entering the pickleball space, and we see that you have this patent, obviously have a lot more money than you do. We can take it to market and do a better job. You say, well, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I show you, I'll let you utilize the technology. Maybe I build it for you so I can make some money on building it. Or if they say, no, we'll build it, well, then you just pay me a royalty from that. So, yeah, patents are a good way to, a lot of people make money that way without having to work. So, for me, I like to do it. Well, we need to do it to protect our technology, because then we have the situation of thermal form and everything else. And then it's kind of touching back on that subject. There's probably only a handful of factories in Asia, and could be Taiwan, could be China, Vietnam, that are manufacturing these thermoform paddles. And I know most of the factories, I know the people there, and yes, a lot of the paddles are coming out from the same factories, and people are making it their own by saying, well, I want this shape, and by people I mean brands, right? So I want to start a brand. It's like, well, I contact that company that makes the paddle. I really want to make this paddle, and I want this weight, I want that balance, and they get a few R&D paddles to test. Once they get to the one they like, because they shared it with their friends or test team, they're like, okay, this one's going to be good. And I've heard it. I think you've interviewed a couple people. It's like, oh yeah, I created this paddle. I wouldn't say you created the paddle. You requested a certain weight, shape, and feel, I guess, but you really didn't create anything. You're buying something that somebody already created and then just made it more specific to what you're looking for, right? Or what your test team deemed acceptable, right? And then you order those, and then you buy them. And even in listening to a lot of the people that own these brands and stuff, it's great. They're in the business. When they say, yeah, this is an injected foam paddle, okay, you don't know what you're talking about, right? Because you don't inject foam around the perimeter. It's a whole process, right? It's a different process. So or they talk about, oh, this has T700 in it. Or these buzzwords, they're cute, and they're utilizing these things, but without really understanding what is T700, right? And what is, Toray, you got to use Toray. No, you don't. T700, mid-modulus carbon fiber is certified, and it has to have a certain performance, whether it's made by Toray. Yeah, there's different qualities, but they're going to have the same specifications. So anyway, you hear things like that, and you're like, okay, they're in the business. They're just getting into it. They're gonna, they have a lot of things to learn from design. So they take a product and sort of make it their own. So that is, I think you gave an example of somebody ordering a paddle from one brand, and then they had the wrapping of another, mixed into one. I can totally see how that happens.
Yeah.
You got a production line, all of a sudden, like, oh, here's, we just finished this brand's paddle. Oh, this is the new paddle. And, somebody in the line there, like, oh, I had an extra wrapper. Maybe this one goes to, they're not looking, they don't know what brand is what. They're just putting wrapping material on a handle that, it's coming through their, their line. So yeah, you can see things like that happening. But hey, they're all good, right? I mean, the paddles are good. They're starting to, the consumer, I think, in some way is winning because they're getting really good paddles at a lower price, right? I mean, you see now thermoform paddles. I saw somebody review one and it was like $99, but you put my code in, it's $89, right? You're like, boy, that's, but there is, the consumer wins, but the industry loses in a way, because the consumer may be getting the same product, and this person who's selling it is willing to give up margin, but they're really not sponsoring pro players. They're not sponsoring the pro tours. They're not putting money back into the sport. They could be operating. In fact, I know some of them, or most, are operating out of their garage. They're shipping, they're answering the phone calls, they're answering the emails. So you have, one or two people operating the whole thing. So their overhead is very low. And then, they're okay with making $20 a paddle. And it's okay if you want to scale your business to that size, but eventually if you want to grow it, you need more investment. And, and you have to, if you want to be part of the tour, PPA, you got to spend $100,000 just to have a name up there. I mean, at the starting sort of point, right? So, you want to sponsor tournaments, you want to sponsor players. I mean, that cost comes from the high-end paddle. So that's where it's not that, some people, the paddles only cost $30. Yeah, but that's only the cost of the product. I mean, but there's cost of marketing and players and all this. So that burden is carried by particularly the higher end paddles, and that's why the prices go up. So some paddle companies do try to obviously make more margin, and they get away with it, which is fine. We spend obviously a lot of money and a lot of time in R&D, and we don't have big budgets to sponsor the best pro players out there. I personally believe our company is going to lead and grow based on our technology. So once we, you have solid technology and even our paddles in the past, like I mentioned, we hit this niche market where we cater to older players. And then I would say the last probably 6 years, we've catered to a market that people got tired of their paddles breaking or falling apart, the bumper guards every 2 months, and they're returning and exchanging. They're like, man, I want a solid paddle that I could just use for a long time and not have to worry about it. So we, on the consumer side, not necessarily the tournament player, we have a tremendous amount of paddles that we sell, because these people don't want to bother exchanging their paddle every couple of months, and they're like, man, I want a stable paddle that I can play with. So we built a very loyal customer base with that. So now we're like, okay, well, now let's go in and create a product that you want this product. If you're not playing with it, you're at a disadvantage. And that's what the pro line's all about. It's like, if you're not playing with this, you're coming into a gunfight with a knife, kind of thing. It's like, that's really what we're trying to do here. It's like, I want to elevate. It's like, I want to set that bar so much higher. It's like, so buddy, this is the paddle you need to come in to play against me, because I'm playing with this paddle and I have an advantage. So to equalize that playing field, you better have this paddle. And that's sort of, that's my goal with that, and we're going to keep pushing every year, come out with that new, and I hope to, be 90% right in terms of the feel, play, and everything else that we do. And we'll push some technologies, even further in the future. And that's really what our brand is about, exploration, going out there, putting ourselves out on the limb and be judged, it's like, okay, the market will say, and we're getting better at marketing too. So, that's always, it's a lot of money. Marketing takes a lot of money. And we've been very solid. So, with our technologies, we're very happy with the growth that we have and the pace that we're on. I'm in it for the long term, and every sport that we get into, we're in it for the long run. I mean, I want to build a solid brand, quality brand that people say Gearbox. It's that's quality. They have a certain feel, a certain aspect to the brand that you want to be part of it as a player, and that's really what building a brand to me it signifies, right? It's where people accept it because you have technology, you have a certain look, and culture within that brand.
Yeah, it's cool, man. Yeah, that's true. When you're talking about like marketing and also like how you differentiate yourself, like there's some brands, Vatic Pro, I think they did a great job like differentiating themselves. Like, yeah, they put out a good paddle that people enjoy, but also price. I think price, they did like, and that could also speak to what you were saying before about like the overhead costs and all that. But without getting into those details, I think like what is a company's value proposition? And Vatic was price. And like some people have a story, some people have different marketing, some people have like certain personality that they bring out with their company. But when you talk about like marketing being expensive, it's interesting because like I think you're hitting two birds with one stone with this product and just innovation in general, and just like focusing on the product is like the point that pickleball is at right now is that a product can almost market the quality of a product can market for a company without having to have like a big spending budget. Again, I use Vatic Pro as an example quite often because they've really stood out in this past year. They don't sponsor a lot of players. They have like Spencer Smith, right? And like one female player. And I think like Brandon Lane. That's neither here nor there. They don't spend a lot on marketing. They don't have, I don't think they put any ads out on like social media platforms. So as long as you have a product that is stand out, at the point that pickleball is at right now, if you get paddle reviewers who rave about that product, man, that it'll blow up.
And I totally agree. So somebody, or a company like Vatic Pro, they have a good balance. They have a good balance of obviously a quality product because the word of mouth, and you mentioned the influencers who give good reviews. The price is right. So, and he's found a group of customers that are more price conscious, performance. They're looking for that performance. Yeah, but when things like that happen is, if you're not developing your own product and you're relying on, in this case, a factory in China to build product for you, then you're at the mercy. I feel you don't have as much control over your future of the brand because you're giving that up to, a factory in China, somebody creating a product for you, and you hope that they build the next thing and you can buy it from them, right?
Yeah.
And I personally don't like to be there. That's why I'm more product driven. I mentioned the marketing. Right now the game seems to be spending a lot of money on e-commerce, doing ad spending, right? Ad spend for whether it's Google, whether it's social media or, Amazon right now. A lot of people are making money with their brands they know the metrics on how to manipulate AdWords on Amazon. And so the product isn't as important there because you're just putting it in front of so many people that just by percentage and they're going to buy it. You reach them first, but that's expensive. That's going to be very, very expensive. So we have to find, the way I feel is if we have a good product, well, we have the word of mouth, we have influencers who are going to speak well about it. And then if we do the ad spend as well, and then you got a good balance. You got a solid company, and it's not, what I would call kind of a one-hit wonder, that you knock it out of the park with this one product, but what's your follow-up, right? So, we're more consistent. We're working. We're finding right now for us, and even the market is, you have the high performance. You've got a larger group in the mid tier of the pyramid, I guess, and then you've got that entry level, which is a wide base. I mean, you hear all these numbers of 50 million people participated in pickleball at some point last year, or the number of times people participated. And then you have the core, which is 8 million, and then you have your really hardcore, which is your tournament players. I don't know what that number is now, but whatever number of people are playing tournaments, it's probably maybe 1 million or 2. So there's all these different market segments, and for us as a brand now, we identify the different ones, and you learn to treat each one almost as a separate business within Gearbox, because to reach that tournament player, you need very specific marketing for that, versus that newbie that's just heard about pickleball from their buddies. They went to Chicken and Pickle and they had so much fun, and where do I get a paddle? It's like, well, in today's generation, you just get online and do an Amazon search, or if there's a chain store, a Walmart or something near you, depending on your budget, you go and you do something, you buy it quick. But I think mostly people, before you go into a store, you just get on the phone.
Yeah.
You search it. I heard about this, or you type in pickleball paddles, and that's where all the brands are competing to be first. When that person does the search, and in order to do that, you got to spend a lot of money to be first. So
when you're talking about the different market segments, like in the first time we attempted this, you had brought a different paddle that hit on that kind of like lower price range. Did you bring that paddle with you?
I'm not sure if I did. I don't believe so.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so now what we're doing now you're touching upon, and I just mentioned it, I believe, is that we're dividing Gearbox into different market segments and treating each market differently. So, you can't just brand it as one. You have to identify the type of player that's your tournament player. You have your frequent player. You have your recreational player. You have the fun, youthful teenage or college kids that just want to go be cool, and they can care less about technology. It's all about how cute my paddle looks, and can I match it with my shoes and outfit. And, it's got to perform to a certain, but the price has to be right. The looks have. So there's a consumer or a player that's attracted to different types of paddles for various reasons. Whether it's performance, whether it's look, or price. We're now very conscious of those things, and we're building product lines, not to cover 100% of everybody. That's too crazy, but at least a large market segment. So we're solid in a few different areas, and I think that creates longevity for the brand. And then it's also fun because you get to do the performance, you get to do the artsy sort of side of things, and then we work on bringing value for the price conscious value and performance at different price points. So we are identifying those areas, and going to be pretty aggressive in how we reach those segments too.
Makes sense though. There's that's a market segment that's not necessarily being there's not a whole lot of attention being put on them. It's like their first paddle doesn't have to be a new Peepo or like an Amazon paddle, right? It should be like a higher end paddle, but just at maybe a lower price point. They shouldn't have to they shouldn't have to sacrifice performance,
quality,
quality.
Yeah. No, and that's what we want to bring as a brand, is to say, look, we can build a good quality paddle at an entry level price. And we do want to separate ourselves.
Yeah, if you look at the stats and they're talking about 50 million people have participated, then why do we keep? Not that there's anything wrong with focusing attention on the pros and the competition scene, but it's okay, well, hey, we should probably be putting a significant amount of attention to those groups of people who just participated. How do we change it from they just participated to I want to play more regularly now. Like, we don't want the people who just pick up a paddle and then that's the last time they play. Like, how do we create an experience? How do we create like this like memory that they can look back on and like forge more and make friends? Like, we've like made tons of friends
Community,
in pickleball.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like, how do we get them into that? How do we let them like experience that aspect of community? Not just, hey, I hit a ball, it was super fun, it was cool, I understand why people were really addicted to it, and then that's just like the last time they play, right?
I think that is one of the missions or goals as a company, is to ensure that the longevity of the sport continues in the future. And the way you do that is you take somebody brand new that heard about pickleball, or either through the news, through a friend, or the hype that's being out there through a TV program, or whatever it is, and they see it, they're like, oh, I want to try it. And then once they're engaged in it, well, I think product, or the experience of buying the product, playing for the very first time, is important, because once they're in, we were successful to bring them into the court and they're playing. Well, that's when we want to guide these new players and see how far they go, right? They may just stay in the recreational side and have fun with their friends, and it's their social. I'm going to get a little exercise. It's fun, and we're social, and we're hanging out with our buddies, and that's it. They don't want any more. But then out of that group, there's going to be, it's like, no, I want to compete. I want to go to a tournament. And then you're going to have the people that stay in the 3.0 to 4.5 level and compete in tournaments all the time. They're improving and they have fun. There's a challenge for them. And then out of that group, you're going to have the ones that want to continue further and pursue how good can I be? Can I become a pro? Can I do, and as they go through these different steps, we want to be there as a brand, and welcome them into every section that they get into, and build the products that they're going to enjoy, in those different categories or steps in their pickleball life.
Yeah.
As we go through.
What's next for Gearbox?
I think a lot of that, number one is really because we're a technology brand and technology driven, we're definitely going to push that space. And I think it's the high-end player, or the very competitive player, who's looking to really excel or improve their game as much as possible. We're going to focus and continue driving hard, the technology side. So that is, that's Gearbox, right? But also taking what we learned from our high-end products and bringing some of those technologies down to more affordable price points. So rather than Gearbox competing in just lowering the price of honeycomb paddles and, getting, I have relationships in Asia and we have a factory out there. We have, a lot of friends of mine that have the factories, and I can certainly just go buy a product off the shelf, but that's not who we are. So I'm going to take a technology that we've created already, that we spend a lot of money on, and I'm going to find a way to make that more affordable and then bring it into the next group of players. So we're coming out with a line, it's called a G2, which is a fully molded paddle with a honeycomb core. We took a technology that we introduced probably 7 years ago. A couple of brands are using that as their high-end today. That's going to be our second tier product, and there's some brands that are charging $300 to $250 for that technology. We're going to bring it in between $100 to $139, and awesome performing paddles. They look beautiful and they're fun, and we're going to go the way I picture it is just these youthful players that are excited to go to the court. They have their little sound box that they take to the court. They turn it on. they take snacks and they're sharing with their friends and having a good time. That's where we picture that line. And, it's like, it's just this fun, group of people using our paddles, and they're matching their outfits. They're doing this whole thing. And, so we're looking for there. And we're differentiating ourselves by introducing this technology that it has the performance, very good performance, high performance, at a different value. And we're not competing in the space of just trying to go cheaper in price. It's just, we're bringing you a durable, very elegant, fun paddle. And we do that. We're also introducing our G16, our G12, G14, and those are more traditional honeycomb, first generation. I'm not going to build thermoform because I don't fully believe in it. We can get the same benefits without having to do thermoform because we do it the Gearbox way. But we're bringing in so we have our GBX line in there. We have the GBX. We have a G16 and G14 that they're also going to be more affordable, and they're going to have the performance. So they have the textured surface. They have the raw carbon fiber, peel ply. These are different terms that use for the same sort of technology. And they're going to have the honeycomb core, and we're making those very competitive in terms of price. But the difference there, you're going to get the quality of what Gearbox is known for. I mean, we're going to produce the product. We don't produce it the same way as everybody else, or even our honeycomb paddles. Most of the companies will build like a large sheet and route out as many paddles out of it, see how many they can yield. We don't. We build each product individually. We reinforce areas that are known to break and things, and then we reinforce the honeycomb and actually created some new technologies in those paddles that I think are going to be very interesting for performance and durability and all that. So,
what do you mean by you don't believe in thermoform?
Thermoform, I don't believe in it. It has its purpose in terms of, I don't believe in it from the manufacturing and what you get out of it. Yes, the paddle does perform well overall. However, they break down. And what happens is you're taking structure away from the core or from the face plies. And if you're trying to build an 8-ounce paddle, you have 8 ounces to play with, right? So if you all of a sudden take 20 grams or 30 grams and you're taking it from someplace in the paddle so you can create this perimeter frame around the edge, well, that's got to come off the center of the paddle somewhere, right? So it's either coming off a couple of face plies or the polypropylene core, the thickness of the wall, or the honeycomb size. So generally they go for a larger size so you have less vertical walls. So what happens by removing some of that weight and putting it in the perimeter, you make a stiffer paddle, but now you compromise the core because you've spaced out the cells a little larger or you've thinned out the walls. So you're taking that structural material and weight away from it to put it in the perimeter. And so now you have a paddle that'll play great for maybe a month or two, and then it breaks down. So hence, what are the paddle gate or whatever it was called, I don't know, where the cores are breaking down and now PPA and MLP and all these guys they're sending people to test the cores for crushed cores and all this stuff. And, it's this unintended consequence of a product that, it's not a bad product to R&D and maybe do testing with, but I don't believe it's a viable product for an industry over the long run, unless, you're willing to buy a paddle every month.
Yeah.
That's totally cool. Do it, right? But your average consumer that wants to buy a paddle they're gonna be replacing it, and I can totally see where it's even affecting the manufacturers because manufacturers used to have warranties that were at least a year, and now they're 6 months, 3 months, 2 months. They can't sustain the return rates, and, you know, that they have. And so you have to do two things. You drop the price, you shun the warranty essentially, or you make it to you as a brand. You're saying, hey, I'm going to sell this paddle, it's thermoform. Yeah, it plays great, but I'm not really going to warranty it. I'm going to charge you less, but because for every paddle you sell, you probably have to replace 3 or 4. And all of a sudden, whatever small margin you made, it's gone because you just spend it on shipping, replacing 3 paddles. And you can't sustain a business that way, right? So when I say I don't believe in thermoform, it's not just the paddle itself. Yeah. It's everything that it encompasses. And so when we build our honeycomb paddles, I don't want to return. So our return rate on the GBX, for example, this paddle here, it's not thermoform, but it has the texture, the peel ply. It's got all those technologies. You have guys like players, Wyatt Stone.
Wyatt.
Yeah, Wyatt, local guy here, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got Michelle Esquivel.
Got Mario.
Mario. Well, no, Mario's now hitting the new one, the new Pro.
Oh,
okay. Wyatt, all these guys eventually will too. But I'm just saying, you know, the last year and the sales of this paddle have been tremendous. And they pick up more and more and more because I think people are realizing the value of these paddles. And then the more you play with it, they sort of break in, right? And they feel right, and they kind of hit their sweet spot, and they're going to play like that for a long time. So even on our honeycomb line, we are really spending a lot of time and money and energy on creating a very, very high performing paddle, and not just for a couple of months, but over a long time. So that is where, yeah, we can make a thermoform paddle, but you're giving up too much structure and too much for the benefit that you get. So I'd rather stay out of that particular. Will we have a combination of? Yes. Yeah, we can definitely, and we're doing some cool technologies that'll come out in the future, but not the traditional thermoformed, structure that's there. Yeah.
It's cool.
So, yeah. Again, we're doing it in a way, when I look at a product too, it's the value of it, right? It's not just selling it, but
long-term too.
Well, long-term, because I mean, especially in California, our customer service is in San Diego, right? So a 30-minute phone call all of a sudden turns into a warranty call. By the time the process is done, it's almost a $60 process. Yeah. So you can spend it on the warranty and customer service side, where you say, well, wait a minute, let me take that money and put it into the R&D, put it into the quality of the build and my production line, and let me revamp so we can create a quality product up front to avoid the phone call. And that's what we prefer to do. And because it's not only the phone call, it's the reputation of your company, right? And if you really look at Gearbox and you talk to people about Gearbox, I believe we've created a very good reputation when it comes to quality, durability, and all of that. And we're, trying to perfect that on the playability and everything else. And that's going to be something we chase probably for the rest of our lives. But when people know right now, it's like, you want a good, durable, quality, long-lasting paddle, you can count on Gearbox to have that quality. And that's important because we're spending, like I said, that time and money and energy up front to avoid, Will we have some warranty? Absolutely. Humans are making these things, and people, and, we have equipment that, fails sometimes. But overall, I mean, our warranty rate is less than 0.5%. Which is crazy. So it's almost non-existent, to be honest. But in any time, your specifications are very narrow. So, for example, even our honeycomb line, if we say it's 8 ounces, it's 8 ounces plus or minus. On our honeycomb, I think it's 0.2 of an ounce, right? So, That's very narrow. Well, most companies, oh yeah, we got a new line out. It's 8 ounces plus or minus an ounce. That's, boy, that's really not having control of your production. It's just, let's see what comes out. And again, we don't worry. And you see that because companies will sell like a heavy, we have a heavy, okay, here you can order this one. You want a heavyweight, midweight, or lightweight? Well, they didn't really design it that way. That's just what's coming out of the production. So it's not like, oh, we're designing this. It's like, no, we bought this panel and for some reason, this part of the panel was very light. This one was heavy and that was kind of medium. So that's what's kind of coming out of that panel, so, you have a problem. So they're smart about now, well, let's feature the problem. So, oh, hey, do you want lightweight, midweight, or heavyweight? It's like, well, that's how you manage it. Hopefully you can get rid of them all evenly, but we try to avoid that by just narrowing the margin and keeping. So the tighter the spec, the more expensive a product is always going to be. You're going to spend a lot more money in your production line because each process, your specs have to be very tight from the beginning all the way to the end. And that's how if you're hitting your specs in every part of production, your end product is going to be right on point. And but that's not cheap. And it takes a lot of work to be able to manage that and be able to do it. But we do that with Gearbox, and that's what really helps make our brand.
It's awesome. I want to wrap this up.
Sure.
But yeah, it's been like an awesome conversation. It's probably the most technical that I've had so far, which has been great, but also just happy to be able to like share the story. Like, again, the Gearbox, like I had an experience because that was like one of my first paddles I got. Then we also met in PPA Rockwall, which was really cool. I remember seeing it. I was like, that is Rafael. I need to go talk to that guy right now as I have the opportunity. And then, just being able to share why Gearbox truly is different. Because there's a lot of that going around of like what makes it a company really different as far as the products go. So that's cool. But also just be able to share this passion with someone who's like an innovator, like an engineer, and you have that very technical background, but you're obviously very passionate about making products and like constantly elevating that experience. But any last things you want to include, and how can more people find out more about Gearbox?
Yeah, well, first of all, I wanted to thank you for, the opportunity to tell our story a little bit, and of who we are and why we're in the business of. Gearbox is a composites company, focused in the sports world, right? Pickleball, I fell in love with it just like everybody else. At first, we got our butts kicked, remember, going through Utah, and there's something to be said about, losing to somebody and that you think you should win against. And there's, creates a certain drive. And so, and I'm an athlete. So, I'm in that pursuit of, of how good can I be with the amount of time I spend, practicing or whatever. But, I consider myself a decent enough athlete that I can get good fairly quick in a lot of the sports that I participate. So, the other thing too is the sports that we build are generally sports that I've played or play or even, that I want to be in. So there is that passion that I do rely on our test team, but I'm learning and I'm looking for things to make me a better player as well. So yeah, that's the who Gearbox is, what we're about. And you can find us at gearboxsports.com. We have 2 new models coming out on the 16th. So then this paddle would have come out, a couple days prior to the airing of this video. And we have our Pro Control models and our Pro Power. And no joke here and not marketing, but this is the closest to the claim of having the most power, the most control, the largest sweet spot, and maneuverability in a paddle. And this is definitely hands down the most advanced paddle. When it comes to manufacturing the paddle, the performance and output that you get with this paddle. And hopefully you guys get to try one out there and you fall in love with it, and you share the same with all your friends, and it makes you a better player, because that ultimately that is what we want.
Yeah. Cool. Appreciate it, man.
Well, thank you so much, Brian. All right.